It's showtime, folks. Enjoy the show.
And here we are, Steve. Hello, hello.
And a very fine Saturday afternoon matinee.
That's right. No Irish
holiday weekend.
in this. It's too late in the day for any Irish to pop out.
You're only morning Irish. Okay.
Apparently so.
All right.
So how are you?
I've been good. I've been busy. Well, I was sick and then I was busy, and so now I'm, it's the sort of the holiday break, so a little more relaxed. I've been getting out and seeing a few things, not as much as I had hoped, but honestly, the reviews on some things have given me pause for some films.
Yeah.
So,
well, we did my wife and I just had our 17th anniversary.
Congratulations. You're officially a teenager.
We're almost, our relationship, our marriage is almost of voting age.
There you go. Okay.
And drinking age in the UK. So that's good to know. It's a time for us to enjoy our time together, and what better way than to just watch
movie
movies
theaters. So you sit in the back row making out and not watching Schindler's List. You were making out during Schindler's List, Andy.
That ended on a happy note, right?
Yeah,
I seem to remember.
Sure,
it was an uplifting.
There was a little girl in red. She was just fine. Yeah.
Well, red. It's Christmas. It's happy. Yeah, I totally remember that.
So you were making out in the back row on the basis of sex because you thought it was a sexy
well, it sounded
movie.
like it was going to be a sexy movie. That's what we thought. Boy, were we wrong. Oh man, no, yeah, it's our annual time to just kind of take a day off and just enjoy each other, and we're both big movie fans, and so we just hit the movie theater and watched all day, and it was fantastic. Wow. So playing catch up on a lot of stuff. Although interestingly, we were debating afterward how many of these are going to be award nominees, and I think that we ended up seeing, I think a couple of them are probably going to end up getting recognized as kind of best picture nominees, but I feel like we ended up seeing a good number of things that are kind of actor performance films,
Okay, sure.
And happily, a lot of female driven films we ended up looking at.
Yes, it looks like, out of the cluster you just posted, I would say, what, four?
Four of the five, I think, were predominantly female driven. We saw If Beale Street Could Talk, which was our favorite of the bunch by far. Just absolutely just amazing film. We saw Vice. We saw The Favorite. We saw On the Basis of Sex, and we saw Mary Queen of Scots.
Wow. Yeah. In one day. No, that's
one fell swoop. Nope.
No, that was one day.
Yep.
That's five. You get there at like 10 o'clock, just stick the kids in front of the TV. Here's a box of Cheerios.
My mom was in town, and so she babysat, and so we hit the it's all at the Art House Theater, so we were there.
Yeah.
The first show was at 9:50, and then we got out of the last one around 10:30 p.m.
Oh my gosh, that's a marathon. That's back like when the theaters used to do the Best Picture marathons. Yeah, 5 in a day. That's exhausting.
Yeah, we only do it once a year.
Okay, yeah.
It's the only time we ever really get to do that anymore, unless we sneak off to a film festival, which we haven't done in forever. So, so it's our chance to just kind of relax and just do that and say, forget everything else. We're going to go just enjoy ourselves.
Well, I haven't gotten out to see quite as many. I'm like at opposite ends of the spectrum with things because we were looking for something fun, and based on some reviews, I thought I will go out in the theater and I will go see Bumblebee, and I will see how much fun this is. Because it's sort of like the counter programming. I have not been a fan of the Michael Bay Transformer movies at all. I saw the first one, and that was enough.
I really enjoy that one. I'm total guilty pleasure, I guess, because a lot of people hate it, but I have so much fun with the first one, and I don't like the rest.
Yeah, not that I hate it, but I just thought, well, that was enough, and I don't need more. And Bumblebee, it's a completely different take on the Transformers franchise. It is very much in the vein of the 80s kids adventure thing, like an E.T. Type thing of like some alien thing shows up with a troubled teenager and adventures and hijinks and military bad guys. And it was a lot of fun. It was more fun than I thought it was going to be. Had a lot of heart. Did everything that a movie like that should do. I am wondering why December versus summer. It seems like a perfect movie for summer that kids would just be crowding theaters to see something like that. But not quite up to par with Spider-Man. I still think Spider-Man is probably one of my favorite sort of family fun adventure films of the year. But Bumblebee is close. Is close. Definitely worth checking out, and not too intense, not too scary. Yeah, I highly recommend that one. And then the other end of the spectrum, I had Vox Lux, which had one of the most ambitious beginnings ever. And I thought, this is really impressing me. And the movie is broken up into, there's act one, act two, and I don't know if it's like a epilogue or what they call the third part at the end, but act one is really, really solid. And then act two starts, and it just doesn't live up to everything that was set up in act one. And unfortunately, act two is when Natalie Portman shows up, and it's not her, but right as soon as it finished, I thought, gosh, I wish Natalie Portman hadn't been in this movie, because everything about the parts that she's in, it just doesn't pay off to the setup in act one. And there's nothing about her performance that's a problem. It's just what she's given to work with and where the story is going just didn't fulfill what I was hoping. So I'm starting to dig into reviews. I'm looking at some interviews with the director to see if I can understand what he was trying to say that he didn't get across. And if I can maybe understand what he was trying to say, maybe I can sort of revisit that and say, did he really execute that well? Because I'm not sure what he was trying to say with this.
Interesting.
So, but definitely the first act was, if that was like a short film, oh my gosh, it's some of my favorite things this year.
Wow, really?
Really, really solid. But afterwards, I think I give it 3 stars because it's not a train wreck. It just doesn't execute on some things. So
that was on our list of options, but it just wasn't playing at the theater. So we skipped it. But I don't know. After hearing your thoughts, I'm like, maybe I'll just rent that one. I don't know if I need to race out to see it.
You could probably wait. I saw it on a smaller theater, so it's not like, the big concert stuff is like something you need to see like on a big screen. You're fine on a small screen.
Yeah,
with this one. And I would recommend waiting. And then did the Netflix thing and caught a couple things. I caught the Bird Box. Bird Box,
right.
Or which now I guess bird boxing has become a trend on YouTube. Where
I don't know what it is.
So, well,
I know the premise of the film.
Okay, so bird boxing is people doing everyday ordinary things while blindfolded.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yes.
Boy, that sounds like fun. It's like the scene in Tacto where they're playing luck game, running through the trees,
run through the forest. Yes, go bird box yourself in the forest, there, people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's a thing, and I know that there's been some conversations in the Discord channels here about the structure of the film, that it jumps around in time, which is the way the novel is structured, and I'm probably about halfway through the novel, and I've enjoyed what I've read in the book. The movie I don't know why it just doesn't come together the way I hoped it would. It just struggles in some places, and I don't know why, but I don't have the same reaction to it that I was hoping. And I don't know if it's that I don't get invested in the characters or what's going on, but there's just some distance I have with this that made it not as enjoyable as I had hoped.
Well, that's too bad to hear. Yeah. I'm curious about it, but I haven't been racing out to watch that one. But it definitely is something that has piqued my curiosity. So, if I find the time, I will try to at least squeeze it in to check it out.
I will encourage you to check out, if you have the right device to enable this feature, the new Netflix Black Mirror feature, Bandersnatch.
Oh,
which I don't know if you've heard about.
I've heard about. I don't know anything about it, but I've heard people. I've heard some back and forth on online about people debating. Well, is it a video game? Is it a movie? What are we calling this thing?
It's I tried watching it on my TV, and Netflix quickly told me, "Oh, we're sorry, you can't enjoy this the way it was designed. You'll have to try it on a different device." So then I loaded up Netflix on my Xbox, was able to participate in the choose your own adventure style movie Bandersnatch, which will present you with decision points. So early on, there's a simple decision where our main character is sitting down for breakfast and has to choose a cereal, and you get to choose which cereal he is going to eat.
And so you watch it on your Xbox?
Yeah.
So you have to watch it on like a video game device like Xbox or PlayStation?
I don't know. It may be, you may be able to do it on your laptop. It was just my smart TV. The Netflix app on my smart TV clearly wasn't enabled to do this. So I'm sure there's a list out there of what devices like Roku may allow you to do this, or Apple TV, or Amazon Fire Stick, or I don't know. But all I know is that there's apparently some devices that this option to choose paths in the story will work, in some where it won't. So
I just loaded it on my laptop and it seems to be working. So
okay,
yeah. So there you go.
So
there's the answer.
So it is a truly unique experience, and I think they did a very nice job with tackling this, because the main story is the story of this boy who is a software developer in the 80s, and his favorite book is this huge choose your own adventure novel called Bandersnatch, and he's adapting it into a game. So you've got a choose your own adventure movie about a character who is writing a game based on a choose your own adventure book. So there's some things that happen with this ability to choose paths and destiny and fate, and do we really have free will, that are embedded into the story. So I think that subject matter played really well into this format of allowing the viewer to choose different paths for this story. It's not a typical, just boy meets girl romantic comedy and you get to choose things. There's some sort of meta narrative things that drill through into this that make this a really enjoyable experience.
Nice.
So it's definitely worth checking out.
I will put it on my list.
Yes. Not for the kids, though.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. That's a shame. I'd love to see some things like that designed for kids, because it seems like something that they would really take to.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I thought there was an article I was skimming over, and I thought it said Netflix had done something similar with Puss in Boots a few years ago. But
interesting. I don't recall that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I don't know if it was Puss in Boots, if they had done, not the movie, if they had done their own.
Well, I know they've had little specials on Netflix.
Specials. Yeah. Something like that. Yes. Yeah. So there we are.
Excellent.
That's sort of where I've been living in the, at home and online. And a couple other things I've been catching up on that were disappointing that people saw my reviews of, like Theory of Everything. That was quite disappointing for me. So I'm slowly catching up here and there with family on some things.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, should we do trailers? I know you're very excited about mine.
It's a weird time for trailers to try to find things. I was going back through what you guys had picked to make sure I wasn't, doubling down on something that had already been picked. So
well, you picked a trailer that just came out. So I don't think it had even come out when we did our last SatMat. So
that's what I played it safe with that one. And I really struggled with picking this as a trailer, because, if it's movies that I know I want to see, I generally don't want to watch the trailer because I already committed to viewing it. So I'll try to go in blind, but I gave in and I said, well, is this a movie that there's going to be so much given away that it's going to impact my enjoyment of the film? Probably not, I hope. So I said, all right. I'll
and you gave in because you knew I would have picked it if you did. Because I totally was about to. I'm totally picking that. Oh, Steve already picked it. Damn.
And I said, Andy's going to pick it. And then I said, well, at least it's in the mix. And if the film board doesn't do this one, then I know Andy and I can always do this as a trailer rewind, or even Tommy, perhaps. Because I don't think this is something that I would want to put JJ through.
Probably not.
No, we don't want to do that. So, of course, we're talking about Jordan Peele's film that's coming out next March called Us, which is a story of a family that on their summer vacation goes to their beach house, and some mysterious strangers show up and start stalking them. It sort of looks, at first I thought, oh, like The Strangers, which was one of my favorite, sort of self-contained horror films where you've got the three people that just sort of show up and, break into this house where this couple's staying and torment and torture them. But in this case, there is a unexpected twist because the strangers that show up actually appear to be the family themselves, but different versions of them.
Right.
Ooh. Which to me opens up all kinds of things. This is what I love with genre films like this, when horror and science fiction can sort of probe into larger topics like, well, what is this saying about, this family on vacation, and what do these other versions of themselves represent, or what is our filmmaker trying to tell us about internal struggles with identity? So many things that this could go down, these paths of exploration, that I feel that watching this trailer doesn't spoil anything for me. It just makes me very excited to see what, Jordan Peele is doing as a filmmaker. And there's a lot of creepy images in this that I am really looking forward to see in context of the larger film.
Plus, it's got a great cast. Lupita Nyong'o and Winston Duke as the parents of the family. I mean, they look great in the roles.
Yes.
It's nice seeing Winston Duke pop up after. Really, I think my only experience with him before has been in the Marvel films, in Black Panther and Infinity War, where he's M'Baku.
Yes.
And now seeing him pop up here with Lupita, I think that they look like a great couple, and it looks like they're heading up a really, really creepy story. Just seeing some of these images. I mean, it's a really interesting take on a horror film where you are confronting a really frightening mutant version of yourself, and it's like,
yes.
It's not something I've seen before, and that idea of fighting something that's evil but it looks just like you is really kind of off-putting.
Oh,
only in
when,
Star Trek,
children.
what was it, Star Trek 6, where they had him fighting his own doppelganger.
Yes. Oh, yeah. and here it's not just the adults, it's the kids, and I'm thinking about the creepy kids always freak me out, but then you've got there's so many strange things.
Yeah, when the little boy is looking at his other self, and the other self pulls the mask off, and is like the bottom half of his face is like all melted or deformed or something. Ugh.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to this one. Yes, indeed.
All right. Yes. So March 14th, and interestingly, on the trailer it says tickets on sale now.
Yeah, I saw that. That was interesting.
Yeah, so they're really out there hyping this one up, getting audiences in line to see this one. And I think given the success of Get Out, that we can count on audiences showing up for this one.
I would think so. Awesome.
Right.
Well, I am, of course, going to sequel to a film that came out 6 years ago that everybody was talking about. And certainly this is a sequel that everybody is going to be talking about. And they're going to start right now because the trailer came out. I am, of course, talking about the sequel to Iron Sky. This is Iron Sky, The Coming Race, directed again by Timo Woronsola. And this is, I don't even know what to say about this one. The first film, Iron Sky, of course, that was about Nazis. They set up a secret base on the dark side of the moon in 1945, and they hid out, planned to return to power in 2018. And this sequel follows up on that. This is, they've been destroyed, but they left Earth destroyed. And so the last people of Earth now have gone to live on the Nazi colony on the moon, only to find out that the Nazis aren't dead and they're after them again. And you got it looks like the crazy Hitler on the dinosaur again. And so they have to go back to Earth and to the core, because apparently Earth is hollow.
Yes.
To retrieve some thing so this girl can save her mother. I don't know. None of it makes sense to me. I don't know if that matters, because this is the most nonsensical story, and I still haven't seen the first one, but I really feel like I need to now because it's so insane. Just the concept is nutso, and I feel like these guys are just having a lot of fun with this. So I'd like to think that's the case. It does have Tom Green in the film, so I have to take that with a grain of salt because maybe it's going to suck now. But Udo Kier is in it, and he's always an interesting person
Gotta
to
love
watch.
the Udo, yes. And the first one is at 5.9 on IMDb, so it's just right there at Pete's 6-star. I mean, just barely under. So
Yes.
that it's not a complete train wreck.
It's
So
one
they're-
that you kind of take with a grain of salt, and if you can take it with a grain of salt, then
Yes.
you're maybe going to push it to the 6.1.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're probably in the lower than the 4. Who knows?
Yeah, but everything about this looks like just a successfully executed version of some of these, made for Sci-Fi Channel ridiculous movies, because it doesn't take itself seriously. It embraces that fully. It's got cheesy jokes in it, but everybody is just playing it so straight. I have to love this, and it's made me think this might be a double feature I just need to do some weekend, because clearly they're embracing the ridiculousness, but they've got an action adventure story to tell, and we've got spacecraft flying around. We're delving into the Earth's core, so there's all kinds of weird things going on there. They're showing some creative imagination that I'm willing to give them some credit and take this on. So that may be something I do in 2019 as an Iron Sky double feature for the heck of it.
Well, let me know what you think. I may do the same.
When is this one coming out?
As of now, it only has release dates in a few places. Finland, January 16th, Norway, January 25th, and Germany, March 21st. I don't know if I have a feeling it will just be a digital release. It's not a theatrical project, but we shall see. We shall see.
Okay.
So there it is. Iron Sky, The Coming Race. Oh, yes. Good times. All right. Well, let's jump into our lists.
All right.
This was a troubling one because the voters were being very indecisive and were not helping us. So it was a 3-way tie. I kind of threw it out. I said, you guys better pick something or it's host pick. And of course they did. And we ended up with Broken Marriage Comedies. This is, of course, The Lion in Winter. It's not really a comedy, but certainly Broken Marriages. And but Pete and I didn't want to deal with heavy films. It's a gift. It's a holiday gift. So here we are, Broken Marriage Comedies.
To me, they gave us an easy one because there were a couple that came up right off the top of my head, and then I started thinking about it. And I thought, if I start really delving in, it seems like there's a lot of movies from like the 40s, some of these screwball comedies in the 30s and 40s. And I'm like, well, I don't know if there was divorce involved or not, or because there was a lot that I thought this might be something. So I started digging in and I thought, oh, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I don't need to spend that much time. I'm just going to go with what came to mind, and Andy and I may have to battle it out on some of these, so we will see. So I'm going to start with I think probably the one that this is one that first came to mind when I think of divorce and I think of comedies and I think of dark comedies. And I saw this in the theater. I have not seen it since. It's one where I don't know if I should even rewatch it or just let the memory of it exist out there, and that is War of the Roses. Did you ever?
Oh, yes.
Get a chance to see that one?
Yes.
Okay.
I watched that many times when I was young.
When you were young?
Well, when it came out, it was one of
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was like, it doesn't seem like a kid's movie.
Well, what year did it come out?
It was in '89. So
okay, so I was 16.
Okay, so yes, but this was director Danny DeVito with reuniting Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner that everybody fell in love with, Romancing the Stone, and this was just a marriage that fell apart, and then it got brutally physical, and I think that was where a lot of the comedy for me came out of. It's something that, again, it's a 6.8 out of 10, so I probably should find some time to check it out again, see how well this holds up, nearly 30 years later. But that was the first one that came to mind for me, War of the Roses.
It was the first one that came to mind to me too, so I'm not going to use it, but it was a film that I really, really enjoyed when I was young, and I think a lot of it was because Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner had such great chemistry. I loved them from Romancing the Stone and they did the sequel, and they did this. And I think it was just those 3 films, but
Yeah.
I just loved their chemistry, and it was just kind of a great continuation of that in a really dark
Yes.
film, but a funny one, and I definitely had a good time with it. So cool. All right. Well, for my first choice, I am jumping back in time a little bit to a wonderful Preston Sturges film from 1943, I would say, 42, 43, called The Palm Beach Story. It's kind of that screwball comedy, just like you were talking about, that it's actually, I think, just a brilliantly constructed film, because it starts with this, this crazy little montage that is the marriage. And then you get the film, which is kind of like the aftermath, and they're having financial troubles and all these issues. And it turns into this thing where the wife, I think the plan is to divorce her husband and marry a rich man, kind of this wealthy guy who can help her husband out. And it just, screwball comedy antics ensue. It's the Weenie King is involved. It's it's just a really funny movie. It was one of I think it's probably the most the last the last new to me Preston Sturges that I watched. And I just instantly fell in love with it. Just had such a great time. So that's my first one, the Palm Beach Story.
Okay, I'm gonna have to add that to my list, because that is exactly in that era that I'm talking about, and
Right.
love Preston Sturges. So yeah, definitely one that I will have to add to my list.
Let me know what you think, because it's funny.
Yeah. So to me, the obvious, if you're in that era, and I guess as we say broken marriage, how we're defining that. But to me, one of the classics that sort of falls into this category is the Philadelphia Story.
Yeah.
Because we have that. So that's my second pick, because you guys haven't talked about that on the show.
We have.
You have?
Yeah, it was a that was one of our it was one of our speakeasies with Steve Miner.
It's a speakeasy, because I went to the main list. I'm like, oh no, they haven't done a series on this one, and so I put it in my list because I did not check.
Yeah, that's okay.
With the speakeasies, but yeah, so to me, this is easy one to add to that list of sort of in that era. So that's my second pick, Philadelphia Story.
It's a great movie. I love it, and it's one that's well worth watching and always worth bringing up again. For my second one, I am looking at a much more recent film. It is a film that came out in 2011, directed by Glenn Ficarra and John Requa, written by Dan Fogelman. It is a hilarious film. It's one that I just absolutely love. It's got Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, Julianne Moore, Emma Stone, Marissa Tomei, and Kevin Bacon. It is Crazy Stupid Love. You've got Steve Carell as the recently divorced man who is trying to learn how to kind of be a man and connect with women again, with the help of Ryan Gosling. And some of the funniest scenes ever. I absolutely love this film. It just worked for me on every level. Wonderful comedy, great chemistry. This was kind of that Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone foundation that they started in some of their other films. They're just a great couple on screen, and I just love it. Crazy Stupid Love. That's my next one.
That one almost made it onto my list, but then I think I've used that on 2 other lists, because I think I used that for my mall shopping montage or something like that.
Okay.
A little while ago. But no, I'm glad you included it, because it is one that if people haven't seen it and it's showing up on our list multiple times, I take that as a strong recommendation. You need to go out and check this movie out. And yeah, this is one I have not seen in a while, but yeah, love this. Great cast and a tremendously fun story.
Indeed.
Okay. So I'm staying sort of, when I think wacky screwball from the 30s, there are some filmmakers that are still carrying on that tradition today and doing it really well. And for me, that is the Coen brothers. And they pulled off in 2003 one of my favorite sort of screwball romantic comedies with intolerable cruelty, starring George Clooney, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Billy Bob Thornton. And this is just for me, it's again one of these quotable Coen films that gets mentioned in our house all the time, quoted all of the time. And this is the story of, Miles Massey, George Clooney, and his adventures in love, so to speak, moving from one end of the spectrum to the other as a divorce lawyer. And this, for me, is my number one. When I think of breaking up marriages and comedies, this is the first thing that comes, I guess my favorite film that comes to mind here.
That's funny. That's one that maybe I should check that one out again, because I remember I was like, I watched it, I'm like, God, it was kind of like almost like the dark comedy was like weirdly too dark.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is really a little much, but it did have some funny bits, and there are a few points that I always remember from that one, and so maybe I should go back and check that one out again. I bet I would enjoy it.
I have found with some of their films, the first viewing is really challenging because you're trying to figure out what type of film this is. And then the second time you have a stronger sense of that. Because the first time I thought, oh, there's some parts where I felt the story just sort of slowed down and started to lag. And I thought, But then the second and third time watching, I'm like, oh no, I love this movie. I love it more every single time I watch it. So I would definitely suggest this one. There's some great moments, and there's a character in here who's a hitman named Wheezy Joe, who's like an asthmatic hitman that accidentally ends up shooting himself instead of using his asthma inhaler. And
that's right.
So that's Wheezy Joe. So in the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, there's another character that ends up shooting himself in the face named Joe, and I'm like, oh, is this a whole is he the ancestor to Wheezy Joe?
Oh,
funny. Are they doing something like that? I don't know, but it just felt like something they might do, is to have some bizarre like Tarantino lineage connecting characters across films. But as soon as I was watching Buster Scruggs, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this guy an ancestor to Wheezy Joe? Because it's Curly Joe, and he ends up, who's played by Clancy Brown, and he ends up shooting himself. And I'm like, if you have a character named Curly Joe and another film has Wheezy Joe, I wonder.
The lineage. Interesting.
The lineage, yes. Of those that are unfortunate to die by shooting themselves in the face. On accident.
Yes. That's something in a Coen movie you may laugh at, but usually you're not laughing about that. Well, for my final pick, I am, of course, jumping into the Tom Hanks trough, as I so often do, because I love his films so much. And this is a film I watched way too often when I was a kid. Just absolutely love it. I think it's one of his funniest films still. It's endlessly comedic. It is the Richard Benjamin film from 1986, The Money Pit. It's about a couple who buy a ridiculously insanely huge mansion for a ridiculously low price, only to find that it's falling apart in all the most ridiculous ways. And as the house starts falling apart, their relationship starts falling apart, and it just kind of goes that way until the end. But their foundation is solid, as the home repairman tells them at the end, and they do find a way to get back together and repair the relationship in the end, just as they do the house. Wonderful movie. I just laugh every time I watch it, The Money Pit, and I will never, ever not think about Tom Hanks stuck in the hole in the floor behind the couch. One of the funniest scenes he's ever done in his entire career.
If you want to talk about The Money Pit, and there's so many great moments there, but it's been a long time since I've seen it. But one of the things that sticks with me is, and it's surprising to realize what a legacy Meryl Streep has, because even back in 1986,
you mean
she's
Shelley
a joke
Long?
Meryl Streep.
Okay, right. She's a joke in the film, right?
She's a joke in the film because it's the guys that are whatever cross-dressing singers, and they want to name their band Meryl Streep,
right.
which you think she's going to have a problem with that? And I think, that she was such a figure at that point that
Right.
that they would use her as a punchline in a joke like that. Just sort of speaks to, the strength of her career even back then. What a figure she was. But it's just one of those things where I think, sometimes there's jokes that you make in a certain time frame, and then 15 years later it falls flat because the reference is lost. But it's so it's just, I find it really humorous that the Meryl Streep joke from 1986 will still play.
It will live on. Yes, indeed.
Exactly.
So true. So true. Well, anyway, that's a wonderful set of films for us to have out there for our listeners. So check out some of those. And those are our Broken Marriage comedies. Well, we are talking about Oliver! Exclamation point. So it's really Oliver! As our next film on the 1968 Best Picture nominees list. This is, of course, the winner from 1968. So what should we do for our list this week?
Oh,
we've got
things with
orphans? I feel like we were just doing a lot of musicals.
Did we do an orphan thing?
I don't think we have done orphans. We could do orphans, films with orphans,
right? Because that's a thing.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure there are more orphan films than I can think of right now.
Let's see, and then we've got
pickpockets.
Pickpockets, yeah.
I don't know how
you got like crime. You've got gangs. They're sort of a gang.
Street gangs.
Street gangs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they have to be kids?
No, they don't have to be kids. I guess.
Okay. I mean, technically, you've got Fagin as one of them.
Yeah.
So I mean, therefore you have adults in the gang. So that's fine. You could have. Are there enough films where it's like a poor person or a person who's down on luck in society who is taken into the good life, or who finds themselves living the good life?
I think there's enough. There's a few I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah, anybody sort of the rags to riches.
Yeah, we'll do rags to riches. Yeah.
Type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So we've got orphans, street gangs, and rags to riches.
There we go.
I think that's a good option. A good set of options. We'll see where people land with it.
There we go. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, it's been wonderful chatting with you this wonderful, I guess it's Saturday midday now. So
Saturday midday. Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, have a good rest of your day. And I guess, Happy New Year. We'll be chatting with you on the other side of the new year. 2019.
That's right.
Indeed.
All right. Well, and tell our listeners a happy New Year, wherever you are and however you're enjoying it with friends or family and watching films.
Absolutely. And all of our Patreon supporters, we really appreciate you. Thank you so much for kind of being there and helping us get this stuff out there. We really appreciate you. And here is to a wonderful 2019. See you, everybody.
Hondo.
Welcome to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we dig in deep to analyze the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. I'm Andy Nelson from thenextreel.com.
And I'm Pete Wright, also from thenextreel.com.
All right, Pete, we are going back to the beginning, to where it all started 10 years ago. We are talking about Jon Favreau's 2008 film, Iron Man, the movie that kicked off this whole thing. On today's episode, we dig into minute 1, which starts with the Paramount logo and ends with a convoy of U.S. military jeeps driving through Afghanistan.
Can we start by just talking about those logos? There was a feeling. Now, the way the movie starts, it's, in our first minute, it's probably 3 or 4 seconds of black before we get our first introduction to the logo, and we see the stars flying in. And I remember this visceral feeling, being just really excited to see that Paramount logo. But I got very excited for some reason seeing our transition into the flipbook Marvel logo. It was it just felt like it was introducing something really big to me. And I felt like a kid. That I was ready for something that they were going to take me on a journey that was going to be much bigger than me.
And it's interesting because I think Paramount, they oftentimes the movies They allow their logo to like have some color tinting with it and stuff. I can't quite tell if this is tinted. It looks pretty close, but it feels, maybe it's just the really kind of subtle hint of kind of a musical hum or something and some wind blowing behind. And then the comics start flipping. There's no music or anything. It's just kind of the flipping. And it's kind of nice to just have that comic flipping in the background of the Marvel logo, which is not how they've always done it, but it's nice to see here. It's
in its purest form. And this was not the first time we'd seen the Flipbook logo. The Flipbook logo, its first appearance for us was in Spider-Man back in, when was that?
2002.
2002. So it's not as if we hadn't been living with this, but I guess my sense is, looking at the Flipbook logo here, it felt like a title of ownership, whereas the Flipbook logo for Spider-Man, knowing that it was coming from, Columbia and Sony, it just felt like a borrowed title. And this just felt more resonant to me.
Well, and that's funny because, technically, it was kind of the same thing. It was, Marvel had been trying to find a home, I guess you could say, the right place to make their films. And obviously, as we know, they had sold a number of their titles to Sony, like Spider-Man and those franchises. And I shouldn't say sold, they've licensed them over to them. Universal has Hulk, which they've had for ages. And they've been trying different studios, trying to set up deals with them. Before they came to Paramount, back in the early aughts, I think around 2004, they were with New Line, working with Nick Cassavetes, trying to get this film off the ground, a different version of the script entirely. And it never quite came to pass, and it fell out of New Line's hands, and then they ended up coming to Paramount. And as we are going to discuss over the course of this whole series, Marvel is going to be, this is not quite their home yet. It's nice seeing them with the Paramount logo, but they have not quite found their permanent home.
And that's fair. I have a feeling much of this conversation is going to be weighted with the gift of hindsight. That now we know how far we've come, and so this feels much more resonant in my memory than it probably was. And yet it still is different. It's a different tone. Can you even imagine what this movie would have been like in the hands of Nick Cassavetes and New Line? Can you even begin to? It might as well have been, a 2018 A24 movie.
Right. Yeah. Nick Cassavetes seems, he seemed like just a strange choice to hear. As
was it okay? Here's the thing: would it have been any stranger in Nick Cassavetes' hands than Spider-Man in Sam Raimi's?
Well, yes, it would have been, because I don't think he had ever directed anything like this. The film that he had directed immediately before, when he was working on this, was The Notebook. And that's,
okay,
completely different. He had done Unhook the Stars, She's So Lovely, John Q, and The Notebook. And then after it fell out of his hands, then he did Alpha Dog, My Sister's Keeper, Yellow, and The Other Woman. And he's got and that was 2014. He's got projects that he's developing and in pre-production, but he hasn't actually done anything since, as far as a director. He's acted plenty. He's been also acting quite a bit. But I just don't see him as the guy who was going to be meant to helm this film. And so I think in the end, it probably worked in Marvel's favor that didn't happen, because I kind of don't think he would have been the guy to bring the MCU into the place that it is now.
We would probably be on our third reboot of the Iron Man franchise.
Exactly.
By now.
Yes, right. And people going, God, it's just like Fantastic Four. They just can't get these right.
Right, exactly. That's where we would have been. But this film felt different. After we get through the flip book, the Iron Man centric flip book, getting our little visual tour, our trip down memory lane, that brings us up into a very different sense of place than we might expect. A wide open landscape shot with the convoy in the distance. kicking up dust, driving through what looks to be a high arid desert, an ominous and empty land.
It is. It's very empty with snowy peaks in the distance. And I have stared at this image, I can't tell you how often, trying to figure out if those snowy peaks are CG'd in there or if they are real snowy peaks. I kind of doubt they're snowy because it's filmed in California, in I think it's Lone Pine, California. But they do have the Alabama hills there, and a lot of films have filmed there. And looking at pictures, it looks like it could be mountainous. I just don't know if it ever would be snowy. And that was the question I had as I looked at this.
Right. They are calling it Kunar Province, Afghanistan, which is, for those who were uninitiated in Iron Man lore, that might not be where you would expect to open a movie like this.
Yeah, not exactly. The film actually, or the story in the comics, I guess jumping back, the Iron Man's first appearance was in Tales of Suspense number 39, which came out March 10th, 1963. And in that comic, he is working with the military and he is developing stuff for them in South Vietnam in the jungle. And nearby, the villagers are being menaced by Wong Chu, the red gorilla tyrant, and that is the person who ends up capturing Tony in the comics. But here we are taking liberties with the story and making it a little more current and putting him in Afghanistan. I think it works.
Oh, it certainly works for me. It works to modernize the story. It works to put us in a place that we can. I mean, we have been seeing images like this on television for more than a decade at this point, and getting a sense of what the military looks like and feels like. And this felt right at home.
Yeah, it really did. It just feels like stuff you're seeing on the news. So absolutely, it works in that context. We should jump back just briefly and talk about Jon Favreau, because one credit we didn't mention that we do see on screen is in association with Fairview Entertainment, which is Jon Favreau's company. And that's the company that, as a production company, when he's making projects, the films that he's directing and producing end up with that credit. And so like his TV show Dinner for Five had that, Iron Man 2, Cowboys and Aliens, The Jungle Book, and then the two projects that he's developing right now, The Lion King and Jungle Book 2.
Is Jon Favreau the guy you would have expected behind the camera on this one?
The film that he did preceding this was that the adaptation of the kids' book, Zathura.
Right.
And I guess that might have been the thing that gave him the leg up. It seemed like an odd choice to pick him. And I remember hearing him and going, oh, really? He did... I mean, I knew him from back when he was acting, and I saw, I guess as a actor-writer, way back when he did Swingers in the mid-90s. And then directing, I had seen Elf, which I love. I had seen Maid, which I hated. And then I knew he directed Zathura, but it just was kind of past the point in life where I was going to go watch that movie. So I missed it, but it looked like, he handled it capably. And my recollection was it got reviews that were fair. And so I was like, it seems like an odd choice, but it seemed like a safe choice, I guess.
Well, safe in the spirit of making budget. Maid was budgeted, and I'm getting this from Wikipedia. I don't have the other budget in front of me, but, Maid says it was budgeted at $5 million, grossed $5 million. Zathura budgeted $65 million, grossed $64 million. Now, Elf, before that, back in 2003, was budgeted $33 million and came in at $220. So obviously a significant performer at the box office and has become a cultural staple. So if anything, to have this guy know the humor and land the humor is it's a significant contribution. And obviously that ended up being a significant contribution to Iron Man and the character of Iron Man and the sort of what the tone of the films that would come. But it felt like a strange pick to me, insofar as we've gotten strange picks since. But boy, it worked out.
Yeah, I think that he really does a great job here. And I think right away we get a great nod that, at least for me, I felt like I was in good hands, because I thought it was just so clever that we see this convoy off in the distance. We hear the wind whispering away, and then it cuts to a great long lens shot of these Humvees coming right at us down the road. I will say, I felt like I was in very good hands, though, because I thought it was very clever. You know, we have the Black Sabbath song, Iron Man, with the I Am Iron Man, and it's that great kind of heavy metal song that just, there's something about it that feels right for a guy walking around in a suit of armor. But instead of using that song, we kick in with AC/DC's Back in Black, which it's a totally different song, but it still had that great kind of just that heavy metal vibe that I thought worked so well to really get things started here.
Well, and that's really it. I mean, just saying the words heavy metal now feels so associated with Iron Man. You know, the weight of the suit, the size of the mechanics that are working, and that we open on this fighting force crossing across, the desert with their guns at the ready and the big Humvees. It just feels so, foundational, so heavy, and gives us a real sense of, feels like we're listening to it in the car or in the trucks with them.
Yeah, which we will find out soon enough that they just might be, right?
I don't know. I'm not allowed to talk about minutes that we haven't seen yet.
We're only in this minute.
Yeah, you're already breaking your own rule.
I know, I am. But
Please don't cut this. That's important that we know you made that rule.
We made the rules. First episode of the show, I'm already breaking my rules. So like me. It is so like me.
We live in our own little character suits.
As you mentioned, we are in the Kunar province of Afghanistan, which is up in the northeastern part of the country. Capital is Asadabad, and it is way up there. So if you look at the map, it is like right on the border.
It's on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? That's where we are, and we're outside of looks like. I want to say striking distance. That doesn't seem like an appropriate term for a guy like me to use, of Kabul, which is, obviously the center of a great deal of conflict. So we're setting ourselves up for, for knowing exactly what we might be doing there in this first minute. And that leads us to a bit of a context shock in the minutes to come.
It's going to be an interesting exploration here, putting it in real world context of Middle East wars and crises, paired with the comic book version of stuff that had been happening in Iron Man. Because as we know, in the comic book, it was kind of put into a real situation, Vietnam. Obviously there was a lot of talk of commies and all this sort of stuff, but it'll be interesting to see as the film progresses, who are they going to tie into this? And so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the rest of the minutes.
Well, and look at how expert that is, right? These choices, these screenplay choices, or screenwriting choices, to actually open with something that is resonant and newsworthy, right? A place that is so clear to us, to give us an entree to a universe, right? This Marvel cinematic, soon-to-be universe of superheroes, and grounded in something that we can all rationalize, we can normalize into our well-being, that yes, into our worldview, that yes, these things exist. If this exists, then surely guys like Tony Stark exist. And if Tony Stark exists, then surely that some of the technology that fuels him exists. And if that technology exists, then surely this suit has to exist, right? And the equation, right, the logical math that they have presented to us, it checks out and allows us to buy in emotionally. And I think that is the strength of this movie. And that is the thing that gets us into it, allows us to buy into the entire universe to come and make some very grounded assumptions and assertions about every film that, in this universe. And it all starts right here in this first minute. And I think that is genius.
Marvel has always been good about finding the ground to develop their stories with. I know it's something that DC has struggled with a little bit more, but I think Marvel, a lot of people say this, where Marvel's characters are people first and superheroes, that's kind of something that they turn into. And in the DC universe, it seems like they're superheroes first, and then they have to adopt this human facade. And it makes it more of a challenge to connect with them. And I think that what's interesting about Marvel is they've found a great way to do it in their films as well. And even the films that we've seen before this that aren't necessarily connected directly to the MCU, I think they still manage to do that for the most part in their stories. I mean, certainly some of them struggle more than others, but I think that they have found a good way to do it. And I think it's really strong here. And I think that the way that they decided to put this together with Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau and the writing team, they've found a good foundation. And what's so interesting to me is that Iron Man was never one of the big characters. I mean, he's always been kind of a big character in the comic books. He was one of the members of the Avengers, and I mean, all the stuff that we have seen, it's really because of him in the comics. But Spider-Man was always kind of like their number one character, and the Hulk was always big. And what's interesting, at the time in the late 90s, early 2000s, when they were talking about developing this as a film, they were really nervous about getting people interested in Iron Man and even knowing who he was, especially young kids who didn't really, the character was just not one of the popular ones anymore. And so I find what's interesting is that Marvel actually hired Tim Miller, who we know later for directing Deadpool, to do these, what they called advertorials, which were these little short CG films that, or mini films, like short films that he put together with Marvel to kind of help people get a sense of who Iron Man was. And it's really these advertorials. I mean, you can watch them on YouTube. We'll have to put the links up. They did these 3 animated shorts with a simple story to introduce Iron Man to younger viewers. And they had to use Spider-Man and Hulk, who are the 2 most recognizable characters, as bait to get people to watch this. And as Tim Miller said, the marching orders were to, 1, clearly demonstrate that there was a man inside the armor, because a lot of people seem to think that it was just a robot. Number 2, show off his wide range of cool powers. And number 3, position him clearly as a hero on the same level as Spidey and Hulk, and having those characters show how cool they perceive him to be and valued him as a peer.
Right. And they're amazing. When you look at them, you want to see more of these stories. And they give you, what Miller did here is they give you all of those. They make good on all of those promises, right? Showing the man in the suit. They show the complicated machinery that Tony had to build to piece the suit together on his body. And I think they're really terrific. They really set the stage.
What I think is fun is that they turned out so well, and they were really popular that they're like, hey, we should do the same thing for Thor, because we're going to be making a movie with him soon. But they realized that making him was actually really more of a challenge than they planned, and they really couldn't get them distributed as good as they wanted to, and just didn't end up putting the money into it. So, but I think by the time they got this out there, people started feeling like they could trust what was going on. And even if they couldn't see the scope of this entire universe that we have the luxury of having been through so far, I think that it allowed people to start trusting them and to start buying in as things developed.
Yeah, back to the minute, just in terms of building us a gateway movie, a gateway property to get us into this universe of superheroes that has, come to thrive, you've got to earn your aliens. DC struggles with that because their central character is an alien already. You've got to earn your wizards. You've got to earn, you've got to earn your monsters and things. And this movie gives us, it shows us what, human monsters are, and it gives us we can relate to that. And, it all starts with this minute right here.
Now, Pete, what is your history with Marvel and the comics and the movies and Iron Man?
So with the comics, I read some of the comics when I was a kid. I never really, I was never one of those kids who, drank all of the comics in, all of the Marvel comics in. I made the wrong choice when I was a kid. And I decided that it wasn't going to be Avengers superheroes. It was going to be Transformers, right? And, I I regret that a little bit because I feel like it's taken me more study to get up to speed on what these characters are and what their backstories are as these movies have come out. Since then, I have read quite a few of them, and I've tried to get back into the fold, so to speak. And so the last 10 years, I've read quite a bit, but I have to say, I have not read as many as you have. I am so impressed by what you have done over the last, 60 days? Have you read all of the Marvel comics?
I've
all
read
of
the
them?
entire library.
Everything they've done
every
in the
Marvel
last
comic.
60 years.
1 year a day.
Right.
That's what I've done. No, well, it's funny because growing up, I was definitely a comic book reader, but I was the sort of kid who really loved the more juvenile sort of stuff. Like I really enjoyed the Transformers. I think I collected probably the first 3 years of those comics. But I bought comics like, I would see things like Wolverine and Iron Man and the Avengers on the shelves, but I would normally not gravitate to them because, they just seemed like, much more adult than my little brain was looking for at the time. And so I was going to things like Droids and Top Dog and Captain Carrot and much sillier comics.
And Carrot. That's why you're still a big Captain Underpants reader today.
Oh, hey, absolutely. No, I have a very wide variety of strange comic choices that I've been saving all these years. And I think part of it is I liked feeling like I got a sense of the whole story. Like Transformers, I really enjoyed because I was able to pick up issue number 1 and start that journey with them. I would get 4-issue limited series. Like I got the Nightcrawler 4-issue limited series. I got, weirdly enough, before anybody knew who he was, I got the Rocket Raccoon 4-issue limited series. I picked up, a lot of those because it was my opportunity to just get a whole story and get a sense of what was happening within that world. And I think sometimes I would pick up a comic, like I have a random Uncanny X-Men comic, and I have no idea what's happening in the comic because it's like mid-story. I don't know who these characters are. It always drops the little, when something happens, it does the little asterisk underneath and it says, check out issue so-and-so for this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know where I can even find this information because this was way pre-internet or anything. And there's no way to track this stuff down.
And then you feel terrible because you realize you're not a true believer.
That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was. But I still loved reading comics. And so I bought a bunch, but again, they were very random. And Spider-Man was the one that I really collected. True to Marvel's word, Spidey was the one who was in my life. But Iron Man never was. I think I got the first couple issues of the West Coast Avengers when that started, and he popped up in that, and I'm sure he was in some of my Spider-Man comics. But otherwise, I had no familiarity with the character. I just knew he was out there, and not a lot of interest. But as you said, because of these movies, I've really fluctuated with my enjoyment of the MCU, but I find that as I kind of continue rewatching them, I actually find my enjoyment of them growing rather than diminishing, which isn't always the case in movies. I really find myself connecting with it more and more. And so, knowing that we were going to do this, I did start reading Iron Man comics, and I have plowed through a ton of them. I've read, the first, I don't know how many years of the Tales of Suspense. And then when I think it went up to 99 and then started with the Invincible Iron Man, and number 100 was basically when he got his own title. And I read a number of those, and I've been reading a lot of the stories, trying to get a sense of what I needed as a grounding for this show. Like I read all the stuff with Obadiah Stane, which was a good. Man, that was a hefty chunk of time that ran, because I think it was like 40 issues or something like that, maybe 30. And that's all the time when Tony was an alcoholic and he was living on the streets. And Rhodey was actually the one who was in Iron Man for, probably years of in comic book time as far as the monthly issues. So, I've been really digging in and I've really been enjoying it. And I've been kind of rekindling my love of comics and these movies through all of it.
I think that's fantastic. And I've not read nearly maybe a fraction of what you've read, and so I'm really excited for you to continue to sort of teach, particularly where these things part, where the properties part ways. So I think this is super exciting. The movies have been a great gateway for me to get back into the comics as appropriate, and I try to read the stuff that the actors would have read to prepare them for each story, so that gives me a little bit more background to talk about. We obviously have talked about some of these things on our the main Next Reel show. And so that has been another interesting gateway for me to get back into these from the perspective of the movies. But this is going to be a whole new gig, this movie by minute thing.
It is. It's going to be a fun journey, just digging into the minutia and the details of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that is it for today's show, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the show for free over at marvelmovieminute.com. Join us over on our Discord chat room, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Next Reel. And if you like what we do and want to support us and get some cool stuff, become a patron over at patreon.com/thenextreel. Well, that's it. Thanks, everybody.